the silk of my gown pooled around me, a river of ivory spilling across the carpet. I sat frozen at the vanity, phone buzzing in my hand. My father's words glowed on the screen like they were carved in ice. "I can't walk you down the aisle. Silas's event is too important. I'll try for the reception." For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The walls of the bridal suite seemed to close in bouquets wilting in their vases, laughter from bridesmaids tapering into silence as they saw my face. I felt the sting before I understood it, like a shard of glass lodged in my chest. He had promised, for months. I had reassured myself he wouldn't let Silas take this from me. I had even offered Solutions car service, schedule adjustments, endless compromises. And still, on the one day meant to be mine, he chose my brother. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, the screen going black but leaving the words etched in my mind. I pressed my palms into my lap, trying to stop the quake in my fingers. "Behind me," Jessica whispered to the others, and their reflection hovered uncertainly in the mirror. The image in front of me, the bride with her painted lips and flawless veil, looked like a stranger. Inside, I was still the girl at 17, standing on a stage alone, scanning the crowd for a father who never arrived. The weight of the ring on my finger should have grounded me, but instead it pulled me under. I wanted to scream, but only silence came. Then a knock rattled the door, and the wedding planner's voice called out with brisk efficiency, asking if everything was on schedule. That was the moment I realized nothing about this day would be simple. The planner's voice faded behind the door, but her words left a tremor in the air. My bridesmaids hovered, unsure if they should comfort me or give me space. I leaned forward, elbows on the vanity, and let my eyes fall shut. All I could see was Silas's shadow stretching across my life. 17 years old, the scholarship ceremony that should have been mine to shine in. I had rehearsed my speech for weeks, poured myself into every word of gratitude, but when I stepped onto the stage, whispers had already spread through the auditorium. Didn't her brother say she got special treatment? Something about the judges knowing her advisor? I stood frozen at the podium, cheeks burning. Later, I found out Silas had been the one behind the rumors. When I confronted him, he smirked. "It's not personal. I just didn't want you thinking you were better than me." That night, I begged Dad to finally take my side. Edric listened, his brow creased, but in the end, he sighed. "Silas just feels threatened. Family unity matters more than winning." Those words buried themselves into me deeper than the gossip ever could. My triumph turned into shame, and Silas walked away untouched. And now here I was, years later, sitting in a wedding dress, watching history repeat itself. Silas had dangled another milestone in front of Dad, and Dad had folded again. A part of me wondered if Silas even needed the event tonight, or if it was just another test, another reminder that he held the reins. My chest ached, but beneath the ache, something sharper stirred. Maybe I was done being the one who always absorbed the damage. My phone buzzed again, pulling me back to the present, and I glanced down to see Uncle Lowell's name flash across the screen. The phone buzzed steadily in my hand, and when I answered, Uncle Lowell's voice came through sharp and raw. "Maribel, I just spoke to your father. He told me he isn't walking you down that aisle." His anger carried like heat through the line, steady and undeniable. After everything he promised, after everything you've given him, he folds to Silas again. It's disgraceful. Tears welled up, but I held the phone tighter, afraid if I let go, I'd collapse completely. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. The edge in his tone softened. "Sweetheart," he said, and I could hear the weight of years in his voice. "Would you allow me the honor? Let me walk you down that aisle. I won't let you stand alone." Something inside me cracked and healed all at once. My throat closed around the words, but I forced them out. "You do that in a heartbeat. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When the call ended, I sat still, letting the sound of his promise settle inside me, around me. My bridesmaids had formed a quiet circle. Jessica knelt beside me, hesitation flickering across her face. Mari, there's something I should have shown you earlier. She fumbled with her phone, then held it out. On the screen glowed a string of messages from Silas, dated just weeks ago. Dad's still hesitating, but don't worry, I'll make sure he picks me. He won't be at her wedding if I have anything to do with it. My stomach twisted. Proof. Cold, undeniable proof that this wasn't bad timing or miscommunication. This was sabotage. The words blurred as fresh tears came, but beneath the grief burned something sharper anger, clean and steady. I lifted my gaze to the mirror, my reflection rimmed with mascara-stained eyes but standing straighter than before. He may have chosen Silas, I said quietly, but I'm not letting Silas take this day from me. A knock at the door startled us all, and Jessica's head snapped up as the wedding planner called through, asking if we were ready to make decisions. The door opened before I could gather myself, and Clara Fletcher stepped inside, a soft rustle of pale blue fabric following her. She looked elegant and composed, but her eyes immediately fell to my blotched cheeks and trembling hands. Without hesitation, she crossed the room and took both of mine in hers. Lowell just called me, she said gently. I know what happened. Maribel, I am so sorry. Her voice carried no pity, only understanding, and that almost undid me more than anything else. He promised, I whispered. He promised he'd be here for me. Clara's face tightened, a shadow flickering through her eyes. When I married Gregory, my father refused to come, said an interfaith marriage was a disgrace to our family. I waited until the very last moment, still hoping he'd walk through those doors. He never did. I blinked at her, startled. Clara always seemed so certain, so rooted. I had never imagined she carried her own scars. For years, she continued, her voice steady. I kept twisting myself in knots, rearranging holidays, softening my expectations. Every time he withheld approval, I tried harder, and all it brought me was more heartbreak. She gave my hands a small squeeze. You have a choice right now, Maribel. You can keep chasing what your father refuses to give, or you can turn toward the people who are already here, loving you fully. The words struck me with a clarity that left no room for denial. I thought of Lowell on his way, of Dorian waiting at the altar, of Clara standing here offering me the kind of maternal steadiness I hadn't felt since my mother died. The ache in my chest didn't disappear, but it shifted, making space for something steadier to take root. Clara brushed a strand of hair from my face. Don't let them steal this day from you. Her quiet conviction settled over me like armor, and as I nodded, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed in the hall Lowell had arrived. Lowell entered with a gust of cool air, his gray hair damp at the temples from rushing. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into a hug that smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave. For a moment, I let myself sink into his arms, the steadiness of him reminding me of the ground beneath my feet. When he stepped back, his eyes searched mine. You don't deserve this, he said quietly. Not from Edric, not from Silas. I swallowed, afraid my voice might crack. It's not even about today anymore. Uncle, it feels like it's always been this way. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, pressing it into my hands. Then let me give you something that was never tainted by them. Inside, nestled against black satin, lay a strand of pearls, their surface glowing softly in the light. My breath caught. These are your grandmother's. He finished. She wore them at her wedding. After she passed, I kept them safe, waiting for the right moment. I traced the curve of the pearls with trembling fingers. I don't know if I should. You should, he said firmly, because they were meant for a woman strong enough to carry them. That's you. His gaze turned distant, and he lowered himself into the chair beside me. You know, when I graduated college, my father didn't come. I looked up sharply. Why he wanted me to take over the family business. When I chose teaching instead, he said I'd embarrassed him. I sat there in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd for his face. It never came. He paused, voice roughening. I've spent decades telling myself it didn't matter, but it did. Some wounds never quite close. The sadness in his eyes wasn't bitter, just honest. And somehow, that truth steadied me. He wasn't pretending strength. He was showing me how it could live alongside pain. I closed the box and clutched it to my chest. Thank you for trusting me with them. I'll wear them proudly. Lowell reached over, resting his hand over mine. Break the pattern. Maribel, don't spend your life waiting for someone who won't show up. His words echoed in my chest, louder than the ache, louder than the silence my father had left behind. I straightened, lifted the pearls, and asked Jessica to help fasten them around my neck. The cool weight settled against my collarbone like a promise, and just as I drew in a steadier breath, the wedding planner reappeared at the door, reminding us it was time to practice the walk. The chapel was empty except for Lowell, the planner, and me. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor as we took our places at the back, sunlight spilling through the stained glass and scattering across the pews. I tightened my grip on his arm, the silence pressing against my ribs. Just breathe, Lowell murmured, steady as a metronome. We took our first step together, then another, following the measured pace the planner set. My gown whispered against the aisle runner, each sound reminding me that the man I had once imagined at my side would never make this walk. Halfway down, my throat closed. I could almost see the empty space where Dad should have been, feel the ghost of his absence heavier than the pearls resting on my collarbone. Lowell stopped gently, turning so I faced him. His expression softened, lined with patience. From his pocket, he pulled a folded handkerchief, edges worn with age, initials stitched neatly in blue thread. L.M.H. I lifted my eyes to his, and he said quietly, "Your mother gave this to me before she passed. Linda Marie Harlow. She asked me to keep it until you might need it. I think today is that day." The fabric trembled between my fingers as I took it. The faint scent of lavender clung to it, carrying me back to nights when she'd sit at the edge of my bed, brushing my hair, telling me stories to soothe the dark. "I miss her so much," I whispered. "I know." His voice roughened. "But she's here. Maribel. In these pearls. In that handkerchief. In you." The ache inside me shifted into something steadier, rooted. I pressed the handkerchief to my chest, inhaling deeply, then nodded. "Let's try again." We walked the full length of the aisle this time, my steps aligning with his, my hand firm on his arm. At the altar, I lifted my chin. The absence still throbbed, but it no longer owned me. As we turned to walk back, the planner smiled faintly, adjusting her clipboard. Outside the chapel, I could already hear the rising hum of guests arriving. The music began, low and steady, and the chapel doors swung open. A wash of sunlight spilled across the aisle, and every head turned. My heart pounded as I stepped forward on Uncle Lowell's arm, the pearls cool against my skin, the handkerchief tucked safely into my palm. Gasps rippled through the guests when they realized my father wasn't by my side. For a heartbeat, shame threatened to buckle my knees. But then I caught sight of Dorian at the altar, his eyes fixed only on me, his expression a mixture of awe and love. The ache inside me loosened, and I lifted my chin. Lowell's arm was solid, grounding. Each step we took felt less like loss and more like defiance. I wasn't abandoned, I was accompanied by the person who chose to show up. When we reached the altar, the officiant smiled warmly before speaking. "Family is a word we often tie to blood. But today, we are reminded that family is also chosen. It is shown by presence, by love, and by sacrifice. Her words spread through the garden like a blessing, and for the first time all day, I felt something close to peace. Lowell placed my hand gently in Dorian's, his eyes shining with quiet pride. "She's yours to cherish," he whispered. Though I knew he wasn't letting me go, he was standing beside me in another way. As Dorian's fingers closed around mine, I felt steady, complete. The hollow place carved by my father's absence no longer yawned wide. It was filled, not by pretense or excuses, but by the people who had chosen to stand with me. I turned toward Dorian, ready to speak my vows. Just as the faint creak of the chapel doors behind us announced another arrival, the reception was already alive with music and the clinking of glasses when I saw him, my father, hovering at the edge of the ballroom. His suit looked hastily pressed, his shoulders hunched as though he knew he was late not only in hours, but in years of promises. Conversations faltered as guests noticed him, but no one approached. I kept my back straight, refusing to let the old ache rise again. Before I could decide whether to acknowledge him, Rowan, my cousin, hurried over. His expression was tight, his phone gripped firmly in his hand. "Maribel, you need to see this," he said, glancing toward my father. He turned the screen toward me. Group chat messages lit up the display, Silas's words sharp and mocking. "Dad's waffling, but don't worry, I'll make sure he skips her big day. Drinks at Murphy's, same time as the ceremony. He'll choose me, like always." My breath caught as Rowan swiped to the next set of messages. Photos filled the screen, Silas surrounded by friends, cocktails raised, time-stamped squarely during the moment I'd been walking down the aisle with Lowell. Laughter, pride, celebration all at my expense. Rowan's voice hardened. "He moved the time 3 times to line up with every change in your wedding schedule. He planned it." The ballroom seemed to tilt. My father stood only a few feet away now, his face pale as he caught sight of the images himself. For once, there was no excuse, no weak smile or half-truth to hide behind. I pressed my hand against the pearls at my throat, steadying myself as a swell of anger, grief, and clarity converged. The truth was laid bare for everyone to see, and there was no going back. I turned slowly to face him, every eye in the room waiting for what I would say next. My father stepped closer, his mouth opening and closing before sound came. "Maribel," he said, voice breaking. I didn't know Silas had done this. If I had, I lifted my hand, cutting him off. "You would have what? Come this time kept your word just once." My voice was calm, too calm. "You've been making this same choice for years. Today only proved what I already knew." He flinched, the color draining from his face. "I want to apologize." He tried again, louder now as though the volume could erase the truth. "No." The word landed solidly, like a stone dropped in still water. "You made your choice. Now I make mine." The silence in the room stretched long and heavy. I turned away, leaving him in it, and crossed the dance floor where Uncle Lowell waited. When the music shifted, he stepped forward, offering his arm. I took it without hesitation. We moved together in time, his eyes glistening but proud. "You look radiant," he whispered. "For once," I replied. "I feel it." When the song ended, Dorian stepped in, his hand warm at my back, guiding me into his embrace. The ache I had carried all day eased as he leaned down and murmured, "You're not alone. Not anymore." I rested my head against his shoulder, letting the rhythm and his steadiness carry me. Beyond him, I caught a glimpse of my father standing at the periphery, shoulders hunched, smaller than I had ever seen him. But I no longer felt the familiar pull to bridge the gap. The strings that tied me to his approval had finally snapped, and the air around me felt freer than it ever had before. The band shifted into a brighter melody, and laughter rose around us, carrying me into the night. Autumn sunlight filtered through the windows of the Fletcher home, casting a warm glow over the table where our family gathered. The laughter of cousins and the clink of glasses filled the room, and Dorian's hand rested gently over the curve of my belly. I still wasn't used to the flutter of life inside me, but it felt like a promise I'd finally kept to myself. Lowell rose from his chair, his smile softer than usual, and handed me a wrapped bundle. I unfolded the tissue paper to reveal a cream-colored baby blanket, the stitches intricate and careful. "Alice made this years ago," he said, his voice thick. "She wanted it to be for the next generation. I think she'd be glad it's finally in the right hands." I traced the delicate pattern, the weight of his gift settling over me. "It's beautiful," I whispered. He nodded, eyes glistening, and reached to squeeze my shoulder. The doorbell rang, and a hush fell briefly. When it opened, my father stood there, a worn photo album clutched to his chest. He looked smaller than I remembered, his eyes searching for mine. "I brought something," he said, stepping in cautiously. "Photos of your mother, ones you've never seen." I hesitated, then gestured for him to join us. He opened the album to a picture of her smiling, pregnant with me, her hand resting over the same swell I now carried. His voice was quiet. "I can't change the past, Maribel, but I'd like to be here for your future, for her future." I didn't promise him forgiveness. I only took a slow breath and said, "One day at a time." The camera clicked as someone called for a family photo, and in that moment, I understood the kind of family worth keeping.